I want to begin with a confession, one I've never really shared quite this openly. There was a season in my life when the hardest moment of every day wasn't the morning rush. It wasn't the meetings stacked one against another. It wasn't even the quiet weight of responsibilities I carried for the people who counted on me. The hardest moment was the 30 seconds right before I closed my eyes at night. Because that was when the voice inside me finally felt bold enough to speak. It told me I hadn't done enough, hadn't been enough, hadn't lived up to whatever invisible standard I kept chasing. I could be bone tired, heart tired, barely standing on my own feet tired. And still, that voice always somehow found the strength to whisper, "You should have done more."
And maybe you know that voice too. Maybe you've carried it into bed with you after long days, thinking you were lying under blankets, when in truth, you were lying under judgment. Now here's the part I don't want you to miss. The hook that pulled me into a new way of living, and maybe, just maybe, it will pull you too. One quiet night, I realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't doing enough. The problem was that I wasn't noticing what I was doing. That realization didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It didn't show up on a vacation. It didn't happen on a mountaintop. It didn't come in the office of someone wiser. It came at 11:47 p.m. in the dim kitchen light of a small house outside Albany. And strangely enough, it didn't come from inspiration. It came from exhaustion. That night, I reached for a notebook, not to journal, not to plan, not to evaluate. I reached for it just to empty my mind so I could sleep. My hands were shaking with a kind of tired that sinks all the way into your bones. I wasn't chasing growth. I wasn't trying to be productive. I just wanted to get a few chaotic thoughts out of my head so they'd stop bouncing around in there. But when my pen touched the page, something unexpected happened. I didn't write about tasks. I didn't write about schedules. I didn't write about failures. I wrote about 3 things that had been difficult that day. Just 3. And as soon as I finished, I felt something shift inside my chest, like a window cracking open in a room that had been stale for far too long. I looked at those 3 sentences. Simple, unpolished, nothing impressive. And I felt relief. Relief because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reviewing my life as a critic. I was witnessing it as a human being. That night became the beginning of a ritual that would quietly reshape my inner world. I didn't know it then, but that small decision to write down what was hard and what I faced anyway would gently heal parts of me that silent discipline never could, and loud motivation never reached. Over time, that ritual took on a name. I began calling it the Page of Truth. Tonight, I want to tell you the full story. Tonight, I want to hand you that same practice, because I've learned something worth passing on. You can't become kinder to yourself until you become honest with yourself. And the deepest honesty often happens at night, when everything finally gets quiet. Let me take you there now. There was a time when I believed burnout came from doing too much. Too many projects, too many responsibilities, too many plates spinning in the air. But years later, after watching thousands of people wrestle with exhaustion in their own ways, Young parents, overworked nurses, tech workers lost in endless sprints, teenagers carrying expectations they never chose. I realized something very different. Burnout doesn't come from effort. It comes from effort without acknowledgement. You can run a marathon if someone hands you water along the way, but you'll collapse halfway through if you keep pretending you're not thirsty. Most people don't collapse because they're weak. They collapse because they keep telling themselves they should be strong enough not to need anything. I used to tell my students that people aren't starving for success. They're starving for appreciation, especially from themselves. And that's where the page of truth does its quiet work. It teaches you to notice the parts of your life you've trained yourself to overlook. It teaches you to witness your own courage. It teaches you to respect your effort even when the outcome is imperfect, messy, or unfinished. Let me paint you a picture. A few years ago, a friend of mine, a nurse in a Brooklyn hospital, told me she hadn't felt proud of herself in months. She was working 12-hour shifts, helping people in their most vulnerable moments, carrying the emotional weight of strangers' pain, coming home too tired to speak. And yet every night, the same thought greeted her. You didn't do enough. One evening, she was sitting on her couch with the TV flickering in front of her. The room was dim. Her shoulders were slumped, and she called me, her voice trembling with a kind of loneliness that had nothing to do with being alone. I asked her one simple question. What did you do today that was hard, and you did it anyway? She went quiet. Then she began listing things, small things, heavy things, emotional things. She told me she comforted a frightened patient. She advocated for a treatment to be changed. She skipped her break to help a coworker. She held someone's hand as they cried. And then, after a long pause, she whispered, I do difficult things every day, and I never count any of them. That was the first night she wrote her page of truth. She's been writing it ever since. Let me admit something personal here. For much of my life, I believed growth required one thing: discipline. Push harder, do more, set bigger goals, raise the bar again and again. But I've learned something else. Discipline without gentleness becomes punishment, and self-improvement without self-recognition turns into self-erasure. People don't break because they're weak. They break because they carry things that are too heavy for too long, without anyone, especially themselves, saying, I see you. That's why these 90 days matter. 90 days of honest nights. 90 nights of choosing truth over judgment. 90 small pages where you finally acknowledge the real story of your own strength. Each night becomes a soft place to land, a place where your mind can put down the sword it's been holding all day, a place where your heart stops running from itself, a place where exhaustion begins to turn into restoration. Let me share the moment I realized how powerful this ritual truly was. One night, after months of writing my 3 sentences, I had a day I considered a total disaster. You know the kind of day I mean. Everything goes sideways. Your patience wears thin. No matter what you do, you feel like you're 3 steps behind. I sat down that night expecting my pen to freeze. What could I possibly write that wouldn't feel like a lie? But then I wrote this. Today I felt overwhelmed. and I answered the phone when someone needed me. That meeting went poorly, but I stayed until the last question was asked. I felt discouraged, and I still cooked myself a meal. As I read those words back, I realized something that changed me. Courage doesn't disappear on difficult days. It just changes shape. And when that truth finally sank in, I felt something soften inside my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt respect for myself. Not pride, not performance, respect. And that feeling, that quiet, steady feeling, is how healing begins. I want to pick up right there, right at that moment of self-respect, the kind that arrives gently, almost shyly, when you stop fighting yourself and start witnessing your own courage. Because that moment, subtle as it seems, becomes a turning point. It's the place where the story you tell about your life begins to shift, where the nightly monologue of criticism slowly dissolves into something softer, kinder, more truthful. And once that shift begins, it doesn't stay small. It ripples. It ripples into the way you wake up, into the way you walk through your day, into the way you respond to setbacks, into the way you interpret your own humanity. Honest self-recognition is like turning on a lamp in a dark room. You begin to see what was always there but hidden. Your strength, your patience, your resilience, your refusal to quit, even when no one is watching. And the page of truth becomes the lamp you turn on each night. Let me take you a little deeper into this, because what happens over 90 days is not just a journaling habit. It is a rewiring. The brain is built to notice danger, mistakes, and problems faster than it notices effort, care, or perseverance. That's not a moral failing. That's survival. But in daily life, especially in our modern world, this survival mechanism becomes a bias, a filter, a tilt of the mind. You can live an entire day doing dozens of brave, thoughtful, difficult things, and your mind will still highlight only the two you didn't finish. This is why so many people go to bed feeling defeated after what were, in truth, heroic days. Not heroic in some movie. Heroic in the quiet, human sense. Getting out of bed when your heart feels heavy. Answering a friend's message when you're drained. Showing up to work with a cloudy mind. Keeping your temper when stress is rising. Trying again after yesterday disappointed you. Taking care of someone who depends on you. Trying to care for yourself even when it's clumsy. These are not small things. These are mountains climbed in silence. And the page of truth teaches your brain to notice them. It closes the day with balance instead of bias, with awareness instead of judgment, with truth instead of distortion. I once told a young man in San Diego, a startup founder drowning in self-criticism, that the mind is like a camera. Whatever you point it at becomes the picture of your life. For years, he had pointed that camera only at his mistakes. After 90 days of this ritual, he told me something I'll never forget. "I didn't change who I am," he said. "I changed who I thought I was." That's the power of noticing. It doesn't turn you into a different person. It reveals the person you've been all along. Now, Let me tell you about something that happened on day 67 of my own first 90-day journey. I wasn't expecting anything special that night. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing remarkable, nothing dramatic. But as I sat on the edge of my bed with my notebook open, I realized I had a strange feeling, something unfamiliar. I sat with it for a moment quietly, trying to name it. And then it came to me. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the night. The silence didn't intimidate me. The stillness didn't feel like a trap. The darkness didn't echo my worries back at me. Instead, the night felt like a friend. It felt like a place where I could breathe, where I could think clearly, where I could finally listen to myself without being harsh or hurried or ashamed. Night had become a kind of sanctuary, not because life suddenly became easy, but because I began meeting myself there with honesty and respect instead of criticism and disappointment. There's a moment in every healing journey when you realize you've crossed a threshold without noticing it. That was my moment, and it taught me something I wish I had learned much earlier in life. When you lose the fear of your own mind, you stop running from your own life, and that shift begins on the page. There's something else important I've learned. Many people don't struggle because they lack motivation. They struggle because they lack witnessing. No one sees the small battles they fight every day. No one applauds the quiet discipline of showing up. No one celebrates the tiny decisions that keep them moving. And when no one sees you, after a while, you stop seeing yourself too. But the page of truth gives you back the role of the witness. It returns you to yourself. It lets you say, I saw what you carried today. I saw how you kept going. I saw how much it cost. And I'm proud of you. Imagine how different life would feel if someone said that to you every night. Now imagine what happens when that someone is you. Let me share a story I've carried in my heart for years. A man in Seattle, quiet, thoughtful, kind, came to a workshop I was teaching. He told me he felt invisible at home. His family loved him, but his contributions blended into the background, the way steady things often do. He fixed things around the house. He supported his partner in silence. He worked hard without making noise about it. He handled responsibilities no one noticed until he didn't do them. He carried the stability of the household like a second skin. But because none of it was flashy, none of it was recognized. And slowly, he began to believe he didn't matter. I asked him to try the page of truth for 1 week. Just 7 nights. On the 5th night, he wrote something that changed him. I realized today, he wrote, that I do so many things with love, and I've never honored any of them. That single sentence became his anchor. Months later, he told me, I didn't need my family to see me. I needed me to see me. That is the power of gentle honesty. It doesn't inflate your ego. It restores your sense of worth. Now, there is something else this ritual does that might surprise you. It doesn't just heal burnout. It strengthens clarity. When you begin noticing your genuine effort each day, something else slowly rises to the surface. A deeper sense of direction. You no longer measure your days by productivity alone. You start measuring them by alignment, by truth, by that quiet inner pull that says, "This is right for me," or "This is draining me more than it should." When you honor your effort, you begin honoring your needs. When you honor your needs, you begin honoring your limits. When you honor your limits, you begin honoring your life. This is why the practice changes people, not because it forces them into better habits, but because it gives them the clarity to choose better paths. A young woman in Phoenix once told me that this ritual gave her what she called X-ray vision. She said, "My life hasn't changed, but now I see which parts of my life are breaking me and which parts are carrying me." That kind of insight doesn't show up by accident. It arrives by noticing, by writing, by acknowledging, by witnessing, by being truthful with yourself in the quiet hours. And that truth becomes the compass you've been needing all along. Now, I want to give you the practices themselves, not as cold instructions, but as gentle invitations, the way a friend might talk to you across a kitchen table late at night. First, the heart of it all, the page of truth. At the end of the day, sit with yourself, not as a judge, not as a coach, not as a critic. Sit as a witness. Then write down 3 things that were hard today, and you faced them. They don't have to sound noble. They don't have to look impressive. They only have to be honest. Maybe you made a phone call you were afraid to make. Maybe you apologized when pride told you not to. Maybe you stayed patient while irritation burned quietly in your chest. Maybe you took care of someone who needed you. Maybe you simply got out of bed when everything in you wanted to stay under the covers. Write them down, then read them slowly. You'll feel something soften, something loosen, something quietly begin to heal. That is truth gently replacing the burden of self-judgment. Second, something I call the voice of gentle presence. Ask yourself, if someone I loved lived my day to day, what would I say to them tonight? Most people speak to themselves in tones they would never use on another human being. This practice rewrites that tone. After you write your 3 truths, offer yourself 1 sentence of kindness. Not a slogan, not a pep talk, not a performance. Just 1 honest, gentle sentence. Maybe it sounds like, "You did what you could today, and that's enough." Or, "You showed up, that matters." Say it softly as if your own heart were listening, because it is. Third, there is something I call the anchor of the day. When you look back at your 3 sentences, choose 1 moment that felt small, but wasn't. Hold that moment in your mind for a few slow breaths. Let it sink in. Let it become the anchor that steadies your night. Every day holds at least 1 moment of quiet courage. This practice teaches you to find it. And then there is the night of permission. This is where the ritual becomes truly freeing. At the end of your practice, place a hand over your chest for a moment. Take a slow breath and say gently, "I did enough for today. I can rest now." That single sentence takes the weight off all the things left undone. It lifts the pressure of perfection. It softens the edge of should have. It gives you permission to be human. And permission is one of the most powerful forms of healing. Now, let me tell you why all of this works the way it does. Because these practices meet you in the one place where honesty finally has room to breathe, the quiet of the evening. In that quiet, you can stop competing. You can stop performing. You can stop comparing. You can stop pretending. You can finally drop the armor you've been wearing all day. And in that softness, in that honesty, in that warm surrender, you begin to rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. Night becomes a friend again, not something to fear, not something just to endure, something to receive. A space where you don't have to earn rest. You simply give it to yourself. A space where you don't have to prove anything. You simply tell the truth. A space where you don't have to be strong. You simply notice that you already are. And when you live 90 nights this way, something beautiful begins to happen. You start living your days this way too. You stand a little taller. You breathe a little easier. You forgive a little faster. You focus a little clearer. You handle setbacks with more grace. You find direction without forcing it. You stop fearing your own mind. You begin trusting yourself again. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful life. I want that for you, truly. So tonight, when the world grows quiet, when the darkness settles gently around your room, when you feel that familiar pull of reflection, don't reach for judgment. Reach for truth. 3 small sentences, honest ones, human ones, yours alone. Let that truth be the soft lantern that lights the next step on your path. Because no matter how your day felt, chaotic, incomplete, heavy, scattered, disappointing, or simply ordinary, if you faced things that were hard, you lived with courage. And that, my friend, deserves to be written down. So let me leave you with this. Tomorrow may never come, but tonight is here, waiting for you to honor the story you lived today.